explosion of information and content on nervous system health, healing, trauma, and somatics, today we explore the wood from the trees with Irene Lyon. Irene, hello.
Hi, Alex.
I am so excited to be able to spend this next hour exploring the nervous system with you as you so wonderfully support. One of those layers has led me to your work, and I'm so glad it has, because you've been at this a very long time with an origin in actually studying science more broadly.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of understand, in that university kind of education journey, was that when you already started to notice nervous system health, or did you have an existential crisis?
Yeah.
I'm always interested in the origin story.
Yeah. Well, I'll do the quick and dirty to the best of my ability.
Yeah, nice.
So I was raised in a medical environment. Both of my parents, they're still alive to this day. They are veterinarians, so cat, animals, dogs, that kind of thing. And so I was, honest to God, Alex, brought up in an animal hospital. It was in our basement when I was an infant.
Oh,
And back in
okay.
back in the day, there was no such thing as babysitters because nobody had money for that, or daycare. So I was just I was with them.
Mm.
And so as soon as I was old enough to do things, I was doing small medical procedures and understanding labs and developing x-rays and prescribing pharmaceuticals. I mean, don't tell anyone, but I was filling up the bottles and clipping nails and understanding ECGs and watching my dad do surgeries,
Mm.
both on animals that are alive, when the common thing was being spayed and neutered,
Yeah,
so from a younger age I understood reproduction and ovaries and testicles, and I also would watch him do exploratories, after an animal had passed and he's trying to figure out what's wrong. This is the liver and this. So I had a really odd childhood in that respect.
mm.
I think kids that grow up on farms tend to also have that real life experience with animals and seeing, animals being born, animals dying, animals getting sick, that kind of thing. So that was my first entry actually into, I often say, medicine and health. I had no interest in following those footsteps. Um, and they never forced me, so that was cool. But
Mm.
I was always an athlete as a kid, as a teenager, skiing, figure skating, hiking, and I went into something that we call here kinesiology, but that's different in Australia.
It
Here,
is.
it would be, I know kinesiology for you is more energy work,
Mm.
medicine, energy medicine. For us, it's exercise physiology, human performance, all the things for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
human body.
Same
So
as
I
in
studied,
France. Mm.
there we go. So studied that, human nutrition, and went to Australia and did my master's in biomedical and health science. So I worked with humans and human performance. And then in this time frame of me being in university, I kept injuring myself. So
Mm.
I kept having knee injuries after knee injuries. That's a whole other story. But one thing led to another. And I was actually in Australia doing my master's and in a lot of physical pain.
Mm.
So I was seeing chiro and massage and physical therapy and stretching. And like I probably was spending 3 hours a day, and I'm not joking, on my
Yeah.
rehabilitation. And my physical therapist, I still remember his name, Ray Dover was his name, at Thirul Physio. He was like, something's not right. We need to I want to send you to another colleague who does something called Feldenkrais, the
Mm.
Feldenkrais method. And I went, and it shifted everything. In about a month, all the pain and all of the crackiness and creakiness and heaviness. And I was fit, like I was an athlete body back then. And I couldn't believe that stopping my rehab and stopping my exercise and stopping stretching and learning Feldenkrais, which is a methodology that is so complex that we won't even get into all of it today. but it's rewiring the patterns of the sensory motor system so that we can have more efficiency in how we move our skeleton.
Mm.
And when the skeleton is lined up, not just in upright posture, but in all the ways that we crouch and squat and roll over, the muscles just fall into place.
Mm.
So this is like opposite to what I was taught in 8 years of university.
Wow, yeah, and that would have
How
been such a mind game.
it was humbling, to say the
Mm.
least, to go, wow, I have been trained by literally some of the best people. One of my trainings was with Paul Chek, who still is going strong
Wow.
in the
Yeah.
world of physical fitness and functional medicine. And so I was like, okay, this is interesting, but I was so busy at grad school, I didn't think twice about the Feldenkrais method. I was young, I was like
Mm.
25. So I was like, ah, whatever, I'll just keep doing my stuff. And then fast forward back home in Canada, I tweaked my back doing something at the gym, and I'm like, oh, I should look into Feldenkrais again. And by that time, Google
Yeah.
was happening.
Yay. Blessing and a
And
curse. Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Mm.
almost 50. So that gives you an idea when this was. It
Mm.
was a while ago. And I was like, wow, I need to study this. So I studied it for 4 years, which is how long the trainings are. And I got into private practice. I started working with people in sport and fitness and all sorts of things, chronic pain. And it helped me, the Feldenkrais method, but there were so many people I was seeing who it wasn't helping.
Mm.
And I'm like, what the heck am I missing? I've just spent 4 years after 10 years of university. I'm missing something. And what I found was the work of Peter Levine. This was in
Mm.
'08. And so something led me to the work of Peter Levine, his methodology, somatic experiencing. And I wish I could remember the light bulb moment when I found it, but I don't really have one. It was more when I was deep in my training with
Yeah.
SE. Fast forward '09, 2010, and I just was like, holy cow, this is the thing that we are missing.
Mm.
Now, of course, since then, I know, this is 14 years ago, there's a lot of other things that I was still missing, like toxins in the environment and all the things that you teach and talk about, and I've since learned about, but it was really the missing piece for these, I call them students, my clients, whom were doing all the things with me with Feldenkrais, and they still were coming back in pain.
Mm.
They couldn't figure out their frozen shoulders. They couldn't figure out why they couldn't sleep, why they had these migraine headaches, why they had pain, even
Mm.
though nothing was physically wrong with them.
Mm.
So that was sort of 2010, and then I just kept going deeper and deeper. I studied with some other key mentors in the field who studied with Peter, namely Kathy Kane and Stephen Terrell. And then once I kind of got to that level of training, then it was like, okay, time to practice, time to work with people. And
And here
here
we
we
are.
Yeah,
Here we are.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
So I want to unpack a few themes. I think that's going to be the best way for us to play this. We
yeah.
cannot do a 3-day seminar or a 6-month course right now in 1
No,
hour.
no, impossible.
But I do want to talk about, before we go into some technical aspects,
Hmm.
um, how you even say it's so exciting that nervous system health as a topic is like ramping up big time right now. Lots and lots of people talking about it, content.
Yeah,
Um, and, I think we can't ignore the fact that it seems like the internet, I was served an ad just the other day. Here we go. That
yeah, please.
was a nervous system certification in
Yeah.
6 weeks so that you can get out there and build your online business. And I was I was floored. I actually clicked through and went, what are they offering exactly? And then it was like, 32 modules. You could see the whole thing had probably been created in an AI kind of
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about some of the things that are coming up for you as a person who practices from a deep space of expertise and from over a decade of well, two really.
25 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, what are you seeing that could be some red flags for people as they start to clock that the nervous system is a very important piece of our overall function and many of the things we're experiencing, to make sure that we're on the right track and we're being guided by good people, because there are many good people as
Of course there
well.
are. I have
And
great colleagues. Yeah.
I always think in health, you know, you want to find the people that vibe
Yeah.
with you, and that's going to be
Yep.
different for different
Yep.
people. But
Yep.
what are some of the red flags? I want to start there because there's
Yeah. It's
lots of them
important.
right now, and I think we just have to get that out of the way.
So where do I start?
Mm,
Um, some of the red flags would definitely be those flashy ads.
mm,
Because people send them to me and they're appalled and they're like, how can this happen? I'm like, well, it's like free speech. It's a free internet. Anybody can put anything out there. And you cannot you can't control something that doesn't have a controlling body yet.
yeah.
Right? Like if someone was to say on the internet, hey, I'm doing appendectomies.
Yeah.
Like, let's go real basic. I am doing
Mm,
appendectomies on this corner in this building. Are you in line to try to get one at your hospital? But you can't click here and I'll give you a deal.
mm.
Right? That we would see that and we'd be like, that's ridiculous. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But medicine,
Mm,
while I definitely know there are some terrible doctors, right? I
mm,
know that. There's some good ones, and there is a governing body that governs you and ensures that you've gone through basic medical training. I know there are exceptions. I
mm,
get that. But what I'm seeing are these flashy ads, and I'll just say them. And there's nothing wrong with a beautiful woman wearing tight-fitting clothes who looks great and has her makeup done up. But these are often the case. They're doing these movements
mm,
with their hips. And when I look at the movements, they're actually very Feldenkrais based.
mm,
And there was a branch of the Feldenkrais method called Somatics. Thomas Hanna Somatics. He was a student of Feldenkrais's. And a lot of the movements that you see on these flashy, and they're very AI because the voice that's coming out of usually it's a
mm.
woman, is robotic. I'm like, that's not a real person.
Yeah.
They mimic a lot of the somatics movements. So the movements aren't bad,
Mm,
Alex, but they're not going to heal your trauma if you do these hip movements and roll your pelvis around on a chair and open up your arms and your eyes and do all this. So that's one red flag. The
mm,
other thing, if you go to those, so go to any site, I have worked hard for my credentials. If someone doesn't have some form of credential,
mm,
that is a red flag. Now, here's the thing I'm starting to see. Someone, because of the online world, someone might have a workshop that they did, like a 3-hour webinar,
mm,
and they'll say polyvagal theory informed, or they'll say somatic experiencing by Peter Levine. They'll say the key words. But if they don't have certified, did training with,
mm,
then you know they might have just gone to an online summit seminar and they happen to watch. You see where I'm going here?
mm-hmm,
Something, because and then we go to the next thing, all the online summits around trauma. I am part of many of them. So I am
mm,
guilty for contributing to this dilution in some ways. But I show up because I know they need good teachers. But a lot of people will be like, oh, I did this thing, or I did this 3-month course online. I am now certified to do somatic exercises.
mm-hmm,
And just the other day, a student was a real student who has trained in another methodology. She's starting to practice. And the first thing she said was, wow, I have no idea how little I know.
mm,
And this person did an actual training. She's trained with me. She's about to do more training with me. I'm like, yeah, this isn't like learning how to make a grilled cheese sandwich.
Yeah.
You are working with deep elements of a person's psyche, physiology, neurology, relational aspects, infant aspects, and utero aspects. A, you're not going to get that all in 3 months.
Mm.
And B, um, in my online courses, I have seen I cannot ethically offer advanced exercises unless I've put people through basic foundations first.
Mm.
And the reason why is because most people are coming into this work completely green. They don't even know how to sense their own breath without changing it. They don't know what it means to sense their organs. They may never have sensed their organs.
Mm.
So then you have them go into this fast, quick thing that tones their vagus nerve, quote unquote, and they open up the floodgates
Mm.
that have been in freeze and shut down since maybe in utero, and you can have a disaster on your hands. And I hear so many stories of people that have tried these quick fix courses and techniques, and they're like, Irene, I haven't slept for a month.
Mm.
I can't stop feeling terror. My gut has gone totally off. My autoimmune has flared. I'm afraid to go out of the house. Like these are things I've heard before. Or some will go and do plant medicine ceremonies, and I know many people are loving that stuff right now. And I do believe there's a time and a place, but they are in some of these people that I hear from psychosis
Mm.
because they opened up too quickly and nobody thought what is stored in that system, that nervous system that has never been processed. So these are just little examples of these things. So red flags, those sorts of somatic ads, I've actually recently found out that most of those women are models
Mm.
and they're hired to do these movements to sell the
Oh,
course,
my goodness.
right?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that's one thing. The other red flags, I would say, this is very nitty gritty, but what I'm seeing, Alex, if someone is, a user of Instagram, if you go to someone's page and they're purporting to be a nervous system coach or an expert, and you don't see any credentials, or you see some that look a little, I'm not sure, see as you scroll through if they're actually educating at an in-depth way, or are they just making the videos so that they get lots of clicks and shares?
Mm.
Are they just showing a quick movement technique, a quick tapping technique, a quick containment exercise? Do this, 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 and you will be more calm. Do
Mm.
this to express anger. Do this, and you'll feel safe.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it
I,
doesn't work that way.
I see what you're saying, and I feel like the segue for us to unpack what we should then be doing or
Yeah.
exploring is there's a dissonance with how detailed and in depth the work of healing actually is with the
Mm.
fast-pacedness
Mm-hmm.
of not only our modern lives, but also what algorithms catch. And like there's just a complete dissonance. They don't meet in the middle at all.
They don't. And, us humans, I get it. We're in pain.
Mm.
We are struggling with all sorts of things. Of course, we want it to be fixed in 10
Yeah.
steps or
Yeah.
in 3 days, and even within my structures of how I've organized my online courses, I say to people over and over again ad nauseum, take your time, go at your own pace. If it takes you 6 months to do this 21-day course, awesome. If it takes you a year,
Yeah.
even better, right? And I
Mm.
say that because we've been taught from a very young age to get good grades, pass the test, get your homework done, rush, 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 and then you're going to get a nice ribbon or a reward or a
Mm.
star to say, you've done such a good job. Good for you. Now go. As
Mm.
opposed to, and we're seeing this in the education system, a lot of people are like, this way that we educated kids, and I was in this system, you might have been in the system too, is like, don't really learn how to learn, just regurgitate a bunch of stuff, be stressed, and then you get a diploma, and good luck with life.
Mm.
And so we've been taught, this is where this gets a bit meta, is we've been taught how to learn in a way that isn't conducive to teaching ourselves how to heal at a deep level. And I would say 95%, if we call it the battle of keeping my students going, is is reminding them the way that they were taught how to learn was backwards.
Oh, I love that you just said that. I remember my first course that
Yeah,
I ever put out was the biggest learning experience as an educator because I dared to call it stupidly 30 days till your low tox life. Then I'm
sure.
with like 300 women in this chat group as we're going through all the different topics. I'm like, no, 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 no. I didn't mean you had to get it all done in 30 days. I just meant the information was coming to you in 30
Yeah.
days. And then I realized, no, this is awful to
Hmm.
try and put timelines on things. And so
Hmm.
my second course
Hmm.
was Real Food Rockstar, and I had no protocols, no meal plans, no recipes. It was intuitive learning about food and you and systems and what your place is in all of that.
Right.
What speaks to you,
Yeah.
what farmers
Yeah.
to connect with. And people were like,
Yes.
where's the protocol? Where
Yeah.
is my meal plan? And I'm like,
Yeah.
you're not going to find one if you want to learn with me. I picked
Mm-mm.
up very quickly that actually one of the healings our whole society needs is the way we learn. So I am with you, sister. That is, I just love that that's come up because we are all so protocolized and
Hmm.
prescribed, and it's actually completely counter to the
It
true
is.
goals that humans have, which is to
Yeah.
feel connected, centered, healed, flexibly calm and stressed, moving in between. Like
Hmm.
this is what we
Hmm.
want, and yet the way we learn does not get us there.
It doesn't. And I would say that the conditioning is deep. It isn't
Mm,
just the last, people like, oh, it's just the last 30 years with tech. And I'm like, no, no, no. This
no,
goes
no,
back to like how we domesticated plants and animals,
yeah.
how we removed ourselves from the seasons and from the cosmos and from our ancestry, and how we replaced it with industry and not roaming in the way that one could say we were meant to do. And of course, I do like living in a home with
Yeah, I was going to
heat
say,
and
you look like
AC.
you've got a gorgeous,
Yeah,
very
I
well
got a good,
established home.
so we
Yeah.
have this because we can't get rid of what we've created, but it's like, how can we find a different way in the current modern world, knowing darn well we are animals as well as humans, we're mammals, and we have a physiology that needs to learn how to be in this complex and really ever-changing environment, or an environment that for some of us doesn't change because we control it so much.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, to the point of sort of touching on doing exercises, I would
Mm,
love to pick up on that phrase because
yeah.
I think we often think, oh, I'm going to do some exercises and I'm going to help myself feel regulated, right?
Hmm.
But it's a lot more. It's about a lot more than managing dysregulation. It's
Yeah.
actually about being truly regulated, which
Yeah.
means you can get stressed and
Yeah.
then be relaxed and just kind of bounce if you have
Bounce.
to. Yeah. So can
Yeah.
you unpack that a bit? Because
Yeah.
I think, I even catch myself sometimes just, tongue to the roof of my mouth so I can take a deep breath, just
Mm-hmm.
sink myself back into
Mm-hmm.
regulation. Like I'll do it as a perimenopausal woman in the middle of the night.
Sure,
Uh,
sure,
and
sure.
and actually I bounce because I
Yeah,
feel regulated now. I was not
yeah,
years
yeah.
ago. Help people understand maybe the difference between what it looks like to live a life of doing exercises to regulate oneself
Mhm.
versus being regulated and using techniques to just help you stay flexy.
Yeah, it's a tough one because, and I'm going to say a bold statement, but most of us as humans, unless we've done the deeper work, and by work, I mean getting into the level that myself and it's not just me that teaches this level of depth, right? My
Mm,
colleagues, my mentors do. But getting to that level of regulation, I liken it to, there's two analogies. Well, one is an analogy, one is real life. If you think about learning a language, as an adult, I have not done that successfully, right? To learn.
I did that at university.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So to learn a language, and I've seen friends who have done that, and the only way that they do that is they live in the country.
Mm,
And it's usually because they've married into a family, and that is the language that their spouse speaks. And their kids then learn that language, and they have to learn that language. And they work at it by going to classes and reading instructions. So that level of learning a language, a second language as an adult, it takes a lot of time. I'll give you an example, okay?
I see where you're going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have many German speaking friends, Austrian colleagues, and I'm in that part of the world a lot. If I were to count 1 to 20 in German, someone who speaks German would go, wow, you can speak German because I've got it. I know how to say the numbers. Ein, zwei, drei, vier,
Vier,
fünf,
fünf,
sechs,
sechs, sieben, acht, neun,
yeah,
zehn.
elf, zwölf, right? I can do it. Wow, you can speak German, Irene. No, I can't. I can say the number. So what's happening with lots of these techniques that people are being taught by somatic coaches, because that's a common word I see, or a nervous system coach, it's like the numbers. They are helping create a state shift to take a person out of activation or maybe the shutdown response, but it's a state shift. And so what a lot of people are confusing, and I'm sure there's exceptions, but I'm being general, they're getting the state shift and they think that that is their system getting regulated. It's just their system coming out of a heightened, dysregulated response that they can feel. Now, we can use these techniques because, I mean, see, people might be like, well, Irene, how do you teach people then? Because aren't you doing exercises? Yes, I call my stuff neurosensory exercises, and they are teaching people how to orient and how to feel the layers of their body and their organ systems and the Feldenkrais work. And it's very comprehensive, but there's no list that says when you feel stressed, do this. When you feel low, do that. When you have back pain, do this movement. When you're feeling fear, squeeze your arms, right? It doesn't work that way, because just like the language, if I was to say, here's the language of German, it's these numbers, and someone was like, what would you like for your breakfast?
And you
And I
say
just
vier,
start
fünf,
saying, eins,
sechs.
zwei, drei,
Yeah,
vier. They're like, what? No, what do you want for your breakfast? I'd be lost. So what's happening is, I think, or I don't think, I know, because I've had students who have gone that route of the technique and the strategy, and they will say, and I say, yeah, it's helped. It's helped so that you don't blow up at your kids. It's helped so that you don't harm yourself or others. It's helped so that you can get to work, so that you can get a shower in, so that you can cook food, but you're still under that state shift is a system that is dysregulated. Here's my other example. When babies are born, human babies and mammals, other mammals, but more so human babies, we are not fully self-regulated. We have some regulation, granted we're full term and we didn't have any birth complications. Our digestion works. We can, pee, we can poop, we can eat, we can feed. We have survival responses. We can go into shutdown. We can get frightened, but we can't run. We can't fight, and we can't socially engage to say, Mom, I'm feeling a little hungry. Can you give me your milk? What does a baby do? They cry. They make sounds. And as the caregiver, you have to discern the sound that means this, 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 this. Or you see the redness in the face. Oh, they're hot. You see that they're shivering, they're cold. So if you have a baby that is hungry or is upset, we'll use upset, fussed about something. Maybe they feel something isn't right in the environment. Maybe there's a toxin. Maybe someone came into the house and they're wearing perfume and they're not used to smelling that fragrance, which of course we know is toxic. It's not enough to go to the baby and say, I need you to take a deep breath in for 5, hold it for 5, and blow out for 5. You can hold that baby, but if you just hold them without attunement and connection, if you stay stressed, they're not going to calm down. Right? Think about
Yeah.
babies that get picked up by someone and they keep crying and keep crying, and they're being, why is that? Right? What is that baby feeling from that person, even though they're getting contained, but they're not settling? So that early upbringing of an infant cannot be done with strategy and steps. And what I've learned from my mothers who have gone through my longer programs and curriculums, and I just heard this story a couple months ago, was Michelle. It's on my YouTube channel somewhere. She said, I had my kid a little older. I wanted her so bad. I read all of the attachment style parenting. I co-slept. I fed on demand. I wore her. She still ended up anxious and diagnosed with disorders. Why? Now I know it's because I was still anxious and dysregulated. So I did all these things that I was told to do so that she had a better life than me. And I repeated it. Not because I didn't love her, because that's not true. Not because I didn't try and try, but it was behavior. So behavior is very different than regulation and attunement. So when we think of that baby example, you can't give them a technique or a somatic exercise to teach them co-regulation, to teach them how to learn about their physiology. It is through interacting with
Yeah.
another, right? It's through the interaction. So as adults, when we know, yep, I'm dysregulated. Yep, this is what's happening with me. I have all the techniques, but I still have panic attacks. I still get triggered. I
Yeah.
still shut down. If you're getting triggered or shutting down, you're not dysregulated, or sorry, you're not regulated. There's dysregulation there. So if a person's like, yep, those are all the things. So then I say, well, to shift that, you have to go back to the basics of the biology.
Yeah.
What did a baby need? I just named them a second ago. They need all those things, but not in a way that's scheduled. And so what I've seen, and you've probably seen this in the health world, if I just do all these things, I eat the right things, I time my food in the right way, da 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 da, I'll be healthy. And you might get to a certain point, but then it becomes kind of neurotic
Yeah.
because you are tied to a routine. And
Or a protocol or a diet or a very
yeah,
specific way of doing things.
it's management. And one of my mentors, Kathy Kane, said, regulation is when you can get up in the morning and just live. You don't have to sit and meditate. You don't need to have your cold plunge. You don't have to eat this specific food. Of course, we want to eat good food, and there's nothing wrong with meditation, and there's nothing wrong with a cold plunge. But when they become this almost like commandments,
I love that word for this. Yes.
right? And then if we find ourselves getting more stressed because we can't have that perfect smoothie every morning, and all there is some toast and butter, and that it's like, okay, that, that's
That's what
fine.
there is. Yeah.
That's what there is, right? So I also think that how we are in the West, I use that term, versus more second world countries is different because in countries that are a little still more primitive, but more tribal, my mother's from the Philippines, so I've seen this firsthand, it is not the same in the country compared to the city, right? The kids are more regulated, the kids are happier, they don't cry, the babies don't cry, there's an ease, things are slower. Everybody eats the same food. There's no special meal for the children. Like it's very different. And so, I mean, that's another sidebar, but this whole regulation thing, to go back to your original question, Alex, which was these ways in which people try to regulate, but they're not. Often, if you've been doing these techniques and they're not working, you kind of know somewhere in your conscious, unconscious, or subconscious, you're going to go, oh, I think I get what she's saying.
Yeah.
right? If you need 10 strategies to get to sleep at night,
Mm.
you're not regulated.
Hmm. Yeah. I often like I honestly sometimes think about how many things I need to do in this perimenopausal phase around
Mm.
sleep. And, we now know, thanks to Dr. Mosconi's work, just what is happening as estrogen breaks up with its receptors, and how
Right.
that then brings this whole wave of dysregulation through no fault of the midlife woman's own mind. But I
Mm-hmm.
have noticed all of a sudden I need the mask, I need the earplugs, I need the fan, to be honest. Just like, Jesus, this is like,
Right.
and if I don't have those things, I'm going to not have a great sleep.
Right.
I'm recognizing that as quite situational compared to like an
Sure.
overall picture. But
Sure.
can
Sure.
can you speak to that, only because it's come up as like this example where I've really done the work, and I'm
Mm.
feeling otherwise very regulated. I can have a very sad person in front of me without
Mm-hmm.
taking on their energy, and I can just hug and
Cool.
listen.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
that stuff that I
Yeah.
just could not do when I was dysregulated. Um, and
Yeah.
and so like biological dysregulation that happens in midlife. I mean, you must have a lot of midlife ladies
I
through your
do.
courses.
I
I'd
do.
I'd love to see your take on that.
So my take has changed a little bit recently because
Interesting.
um so I'll be 49 in November.
Oh my gosh, me too. Exactly. Yeah.
What day? What day?
22nd.
13th for me.
13 is my lucky number.
There you go.
Oh, there you
So
go.
so we're 1975. I think I'm 49 this year.
Yes, we are.
1975. Okay.
Hmm.
So I have seen well, really three situations.
Mm,
I was someone who never had any hormonal problems
mm,
at all. Um, and for me, the regulation of my nervous system, I wouldn't say it didn't do anything, because
mm,
as I got more regulated, there was something else happening 3 years ago where my hormones were going wonky to death.
mm,
I
mm-hmm,
have some ideas as to what was going on back in August of 2021. Since then, everything that was weird, everything that was crashing, I lost half of my hair. Like it was brutal.
mm.
I won't get in all the gory details, but women can probably
Yeah,
understand.
we can fill in the gaps. Yeah.
What was coming out that probably shouldn't have been.
Mm,
Since then, I have found a really great naturopathic doctor,
mm,
and I did deeper tests that my GP wouldn't do.
mm.
She was like, "Oh, you're this is fine. This is fine." I'm like, "I don't feel fine.
This
Something's
is
not
not
right here."
fine. Yeah, it's like that meme with the cartoon character and the fire in the background saying,
Yeah.
this is fine.
So for
Mm,
me, I'm like, okay, I know this isn't trauma. I know, because I have gotten so much of this stuff out, and other parts of my system are way better. For me, it was very I wish I could say it was one thing, because it
mm,
wasn't blood sugar. Like my mitochondrial health is good, all this stuff. So something threw me off. It's back, it's better. However, I have met students who have perfect labs, perfect hormones, and yet they are in agony with
mm,
their menstrual cycles. Everything is wonky. And what they have said is, as they've healed their traumas and worked on all the things, especially anger, getting
mm,
good at healthy aggression, boundaries, working with toxic shame, all the things that kept their system out of flow, they have seen, wow, my cycle's a bit better, my cycle's a bit better. And into their 40s, into their late 40s. Recently, I've had more information and more study around the quantum and circadian biology world, which is just hot stuff right now. Um,
mm.
and I don't know if you've ever come across Sarah Kleiner or Carrie Bennett.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
So they're
Yeah.
good friends of mine. And when they got on to the stuff that Jack Cruz was doing, who is a
Mm,
neurosurgeon who kind of brought this stuff up and out, um, I found that in conjunction with the naturopathic work was what completely shifted things. Getting more aligned with the sun, being outside more, more skin exposure to sun, grounding, the non-native EMFs, the red light therapy. That is what shifted things dramatically. And many of the women that I follow in that sphere will actually say we're not supposed to get perimenopause symptoms. We're not supposed to get any of that. And then there's some people that will say, oh, it's genetic. People in Asia don't tend to have as much, they don't. And my mother had nothing when she shifted into menopause. So is it genetic? I don't know. But so I've sort of seen these three lines of difference.
Yeah.
And I think genetically we are very different, not just females, but each female is different. But I have seen, as I talk to my women who get more aligned with this circadian biology, they're eating cleaner, they're having more fat and protein in their
So
diet.
key. Yeah.
Makes a huge, huge difference. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I wish that
No,
there
I
isn't
just,
like a straightforward answer I have found.
yeah.
Because some get better with the nervous system work, some it doesn't do anything, others need the nutrition, others need to actually be doing bioidentical hormones, other people, it makes them sick.
Yeah. And I think it just speaks to your own individual journey. So I'll
Yes.
just plug on with my earplugs and my mask that help me do it right for now.
Yeah. I mean, and I also have found that, even though I am more regulated, things like airline travel bothers me more. Like I get more impacted. And I think that's a sign of not being in functional freeze anymore. So when we are more in tune with ourselves, like we're really not meant to get in a tin can.
Yeah.
That pressurizes us and flies at 35,000 feet above sea level.
As
With
special
no,
as it is. Yeah,
as
I know.
amazing as it is, and I love it to get places, it's like, oof, I could feel that, Whereas in my 20s, it's like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But I probably wasn't because I was dysregulated, shut down, and not feeling these things.
Yeah. And so what can help someone realize, Irene, that they need to do this work, even though they might think they don't? Like there must be a pretty big category of people walking around who are like, no, I'm fine. Or of course you're going to get stressed, but you're not supposed to stay stressed after an email came through. What are some of the really typical symptoms that you see people ignore for a long time?
It's a long list. I mean, I think that I'll start this answer by talking quickly about the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. Have you heard of this?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course. Yeah.
So it's all over the internet. The short of it is we have found out, and I don't want to say it's factual, but it's pretty conclusive
Indicative. It's indicative. Yeah.
It's indicative. And when something gets shown and proven across multiple countries in multiple groups, it's like, yeah, we know that this is happening. So when we have had early childhood stress, adversity, anything that throws our nervous system into terror, fear that's constant and chronic, if that is not helped and healed, which for most of us, it never was, because we didn't know about this stuff in the 70s, the 60s, the 80s, the 90s, even the 2000s, we will get sick. Even with the good diet and the exercise, because the survival physiology, so the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, a portion of the parasympathetic nervous system that governs the freeze response and the shutdown response, they're just kind of humming along at a high level. And over time, that humming along, that being on a little bit, not so much that the person is collapsed, and not so much the person has to be admitted to a psych ward due to excessive psychosis and activation, but the general everyday person who goes to work and wakes up with an alarm and they are tired and they keep pushing and they're tired, but they keep pushing, or they push and push and then they sleep for an entire weekend and they do it all over again. So many of us are in this dysregulation without knowing it. But what happens is when we're in that dysregulation, the part of the parasympathetic nervous system that governs immune system enhancing, gut repair, and cell repair, it doesn't get turned on. That's what true rest digest should do.
Yeah.
That is also part of the parasympathetic nervous system. So what happens is the system is co-opted to survival, fight, flight, freeze. So then this rest digest, I'm using my hands, this rest digest, it's kind of like brushed over to the side.
And so you're never actually in there.
It does. It's like a little bit, but then, okay, we're going into another stress response. Oh, you're going to have one night where you chill out a bit. Great. We're going to get going. Oh, no, you're back to whatever. Right. And so what happens, and this is where we have seen, often people don't get sick until they're older. Right. Oh, she finally got finally some, cancer, heart disease, autoimmune. It's because youth keeps us going for a certain while, but eventually we can't keep going. So what this study showed, a study, was that where we often think, oh, I don't have trauma, I don't have dysregulation, we liken that to PTSD, right? Chronic anxiety, depression. But this dysregulation creates certain cancers, heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia, depression, addiction. All of the chronic conditions, fibromyalgia that we're seeing, rheumatoid arthritis, heart palpitations, respiratory problems, asthma is a big one that's connected to sympathetic dysregulation and just the system being in a constant state of terror. Essentially, it's constriction and dilation wonky, right? If we think about the digestive system, we want have food goes in, liquid goes in, we want it to have a nice flow down the tubes, so then it excretes through the urine, through the bowel movements. But what happens when we're stressed? That goes wonky. So what's occurring in so many people is this mild dysregulation that they often think, Alex, just life. Like, isn't that common to be constipated? Like, a lot of people don't realize how regular their bowels should be.
Yeah.
They don't realize that, oh, I can feel, I'm getting a little sick. And then you want to feel the fever and you want to feel the flush. And that's what takes care of whatever we call it, that thing that is a cold, right? But so many people have these symptoms of and I use the digestion because it's one of the easiest ones to describe, right? Bloating, diarrhea, constipation, or immune system, or the cut never heals. It's like it takes forever to heal. Chronic, I'm always stiff. I'm always, I can't sleep. All these things. I have migraine headaches once a week. Some people think that that's normal. Actually, it's not normal. There's something going on at the autonomic nervous system level that is keeping that flow from recovering your system, so that you just don't really, I don't want to say feel nothing, because that's not true. We want to feel sensations, but we don't want to be in this constant state of stress. I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope it does, but let me know.
No, it really does. I think a lot of us rationalize symptoms and we just, oh, I've got a gut thing, so I've got to do a gut protocol and I've got to do this and I've got to, and like, I really wanted to make a case for looking wider and deeper than a couple of symptoms.
Here's another good example. This just happened to a friend of mine. She got bit by a spider. And she sent me the pictures. I was like, whoa, like big welt, swollen leg. She got it at a music festival, and she's very holistic. And so she ain't going to take nothing other than maybe some homeopathy and put some, herbs on it and just leave it alone. And it's recovered, it's healing. Another woman who got the same spider bite at this place took antihistamines. Someone said you should go on antibiotics. Her bite isn't healing. And it's not because we know the system has a natural defense to take care of poisons, toxins, etc. And she infiltrated it with things to take away the inflammation in that acute state, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
take away the natural bacteria fighting white blood cells that want to go in there and eat, whatever it is that that spider bite is creating. And what I've learned, and I mean, I grew up in a medical environment where we medicated a lot of dogs and cats with steroids and antibiotics and fungal creams and all these things. But with humans, it's amazing how many symptoms don't need treatment. They need to be felt. They need to be sensed. Our emotions, which we interpret in the brain, they originate from our organs.
Yeah.
They originate from the sensation. And so often, because we're shut down from those sensations, we miss the opportunity for healing in the body because it's like, oh, that's just a sharp pain. It's not important. I'll pop some antacids or something like that. So what I have seen with my students is as they get more regulated, they start to, while it's still tough, they embrace the difficult sensation. They embrace the quote unquote anxiety because they know this is a survival response. Something's telling me that something either is off in the environment or something's off inside. Like my girlfriend with the spider bite, she knew something was wrong because she started to get nauseous and she had a fever spike. And she's like, what just happened? Right?
Yeah.
So many people won't notice that because of the disconnection, which we get because we push, push, push. We don't feel our bodies, and that's
Or
a
you
whole other.
notice it and you make it quiet, as quick as possible.
Let's just get rid of this, right? It's like a kid who's having a tantrum. They don't have a tantrum just because they're trying to be pissy and make the parent difficult, piss them off. They are feeling massive activation that has not been allowed to come out, usually due to misattunement of whomever was taking care of them. So we're just going to push a little more, a little more. We're going to do one more thing, one more shot, one more sport, and then they blow because they can't keep that intensity inside.
Yeah.
There's no outlet.
Yeah, I
So
almost feel like our 2 and our 3-year-olds show us what
they
pushing
sure
too
do.
much is, you know.
Yeah, as do
Yeah.
babies, that they know when they're not well. They cry based on not emotion. They cry based on physiology. A baby that's wailing isn't trying to be dramatic. They might have,
Yeah.
they're usually it's one of a few things. They're hungry. So their abdomen is distending. They are cold. They're hot. They feel fear around them. They're not being attuned to. And what we do know is, and you've probably heard of the cry it out method, which was so common for so many of us growing up, is let the baby cry, let them cry it out. That will teach them how to cope, how to self-regulate. We actually know that is the opposite. It actually teaches them to go into shutdown.
Yeah.
So we have an entire humanity, at least in the West, whom have been brought up in that way. And so what happens? They shut down as infants. And that's the start of our sensations, our physiology being not attuned to, not honored. That's the word I'm looking for. Right.
And so if someone is hearing that right now and they're like, oh my gosh, I did that with my baby.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the right thing to do. And like, what is, I know we are not in a quick fix conversation. I know that. Don't worry. But where does someone start to heal that?
Yeah. You feel it. You feel it. You grieve.
And would you say it would be useful to grieve like with your kid who's now a teenager or an adult, or you do this separately?
It depends on the age. So it depends on the emotional maturity of the child. I would not do this when they're infants.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
That's already happened when they're toddlers, when they're children, even young teens. But when they're interested, here's the other thing, if they're interested in mom, right? That's where you might have the conversation and be like, I've just learned something. And I realized that happened, and I did that with you, and I need to say I'm sorry, and you might not remember,
Mm.
right? But I would say first grieve on your own, because you don't want to show emotional distress to your children ever, right? Because
Interesting.
they will start to take care of you.
Mm.
I'm not saying you can't shed a tear, right? That kind of thing. But when you have a child that is still quite immature and emotionally, physically dependent on you as the caregiver, the moment they see that mom or dad is unwell and can't cope with their emotions or their situations, the child will change to save the family system.
Hmm. Wow.
We see this, I see this tons and tons with my students who are older and they're suffering from chronic illness. They're like, yeah, my mother was mentally unwell. She couldn't take care of me, or she had cancer, or she wasn't around,
Mm.
right? She was working all the time. So I had to take care of myself. So to go back to the cry it out thing, first you just go, I didn't know, right? It's
Mm.
not about blaming. There's no shame. There's so many mothers that were and fathers that were well-meaning, and yet they followed what the pediatricians told them to do. We're
Mm.
starting to unravel that, which is good. So you've got to do your own work around it. And what I've seen and my colleagues have seen is when the parent, even if you have adult children, when they start to regulate their own nervous system because of the field and the quantum world, it ripples out to
Mm.
the adult children. And so that happens. Kids are very perceptive, and they'll notice, mom's doing something different. She's
Mm.
asking me questions in a different way. She's not threatening me
Mm.
with things that she like, and the kid won't think this cognitively, but they'll notice something's different.
There's a
Wow,
different vibe. Yeah.
yeah, when she eats her food in the morning, she's not, dropping her spoon into the bowl and doing the
Mm.
dishes with venom and survive. Like, they're not going to think, wow, mom's not in survival stress anymore. They're not going to think that, but they're going to notice a different energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's that going to do? They're going to feel more safe.
Mm.
As they feel more safe, let's say there was the cry it out thing, they might start to finally express the terror, the tension that was held in their system since infancy. But
Mm.
this is where it's so important for the parent to learn the education to go, wow, as I'm starting to regulate and actually be in my body in a more holistic way, I'm starting to see that my kid is getting a little testier. This is just one example.
Mm. Yeah,
Right?
interesting.
They're starting to actually exert their autonomy in a different way, say as a teenager, because a teenager, whenever I see a parent with a teenager or parents who have teenagers and they're like, yeah, my kid just told me to fuck off. And I'm like, that's great. And they're
Yeah.
like, what? I'm like, it shows that they feel safe
Yeah.
to express themselves. Of course they use that language with their friends. Like, come on.
Mm.
Right? It's so like as soon as you start to see that life force energy, that can be an indication that and I'm using the cried out scenario, that shutdown that they had to go into because nobody was there when they were in distress,
Yeah.
that survival stress of pain and terror, and nobody is here. No
Mm.
one's here. I'm crying. No one's here. As a teenager, as a child, as mom or dad starts to become more regulated, they would be like, oh, I can let go.
Mm.
I can let down my own survival of being this perfect kid, because
Yeah.
that's right. You see where I'm going there?
Yeah.
But then the
100%.
parent, they have to be willing to take
To let the
what's
kid express.
what's
Yeah.
going to come out.
Mm.
It's kind of like when I was in private practice, I had to be okay with my students saying pretty mean stuff to me sometimes.
Mm.
And it wasn't because they were mad at me per se, they were mad at the fact that I was bringing up these old wounds that were so difficult to feel.
Mm.
But we have to feel and sense these things to move them out, heal them, and integrate them. And so what has gotten a lot of kiddos into trouble through parents that don't understand this is they're like, you have to behave. Stop doing that. It's like, well, actually, they're trying to express themselves and
Mm.
heal, and they're getting it out. But if we don't understand what that means,
Yeah.
that can shut them down even more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the parenting, we just did a few master classes on parenting, my husband and I, and we tried to get these two master classes into 90 minutes, and each went over 2 hours because there's just
Yeah, I
so
can imagine.
there's so much, and we've been conditioned to not think that it can be easy,
Mm.
right? Like the human species would not have gotten this far
Mm.
if it wasn't natural.
Mm.
And so we're at this precipice where we know a lot of kids are sick. A lot of kids have various disorders that are being medicated over and over again. It's like, this isn't going to go well if we don't shift this to more
Mm.
natural ways and also get our regulation back.
Yeah.
So
And so
that's like an existential one right there.
super existential. And I kind of want to stay with it and almost finish with it because
Sure.
I don't want to leave it yet.
Yeah, it's an important one.
The parent-child dynamic.
Yeah.
Um, Screens, technology, like so
Yeah.
much time on screens. And I often
Mhm.
wonder whether and I'm guilty, like I have an online business, so
Me too. Me
I'm
too.
on my screen a lot. This is by no means a judgment. It is we are all in this. How's the best way
Mhm.
forward?
Mhm.
Um, what do you think can help us realize the power of being off screens in regulation and successful regulation being? Because I feel like you don't even have to have a difficult emotion for half a minute anymore. You can just go watch a funny dog video and it takes your mind off it, and then you move on, and then you're all of a sudden watching three different things, and then you're scrolling, and then 3 hours have gone past, and it's like, oh yeah, that wasn't so bad in the end anyway.
Yeah.
But because you didn't feel the thing and
Yeah.
move through it, you kind of bottled it. You didn't get
Yeah.
over it, right?
Yeah. What I've seen in my students, if I
Mm.
talk about adults, is that many of them have found that when they get real regulation on board,
Mm.
they're fine with
Mm-hmm.
it. And it's the same reason I've heard many stories of, I no longer overeat. I no longer have addiction to drugs or alcohol or pain meds
Mm.
or that thing that I do that soothes me. Maybe it's scrolling, maybe it's
Yeah.
whatever. Because what happens is when you get that regulation on board, it isn't just about the nervous system, it's about catching your physiology shift
Mm.
and go into usually it's constriction, not always, but constriction leads to collapse if you don't get out of it.
Mm.
And so a lot of people, I mean, it's the classic slumped on the television, or not on
Yeah.
the television, on the couch watching TV, what do we call it? Binge watching,
Mm-hmm.
just mindlessly. I also think that there's some fun in doing that when you're consciously doing it,
Yes.
right?
Mm.
Just like you might read a book front to cover because it's so good.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you look at the technology that we have in a way that's healthy? Is like, I am gonna binge watch this fun show because I need a laugh and I
Mm.
need to not think about something for a while. That is very different, Alex, than chronic binging of things. And it doesn't have to be a show. It's again, it's food, it's certain behaviors that are not good for us.
Mm.
Um, if it means that we are not, it's going to sound really domestic, if it means that we are not feeding ourselves, we're not cleaning our home, we're not taking care of our domestic affairs, we're letting things slip, we're not calling people back, like people of
Mm.
course are
Okay.
good for people that are good for us, of course, if we don't call the toxic people, but it's that ability to be like, okay, I have not just control, but I can let go of control and have fun with this app or
Mm.
the show or whatever, and know that I can pull myself out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
what I'm
right?
hearing, just to make sure I've got this,
Yeah,
is it's okay to take a break from the stresses of
of
life that you might be
course.
having that
We
day.
have to.
And, like that. So it's kind of like light moments versus escape and avoidance.
Yes.
Mm,
And it's with, we would call it, the word for regulation where we're socially engaging with
mm,
goodness is, um, it's the ventral vagal aspect of the vagus nerve. It's the fancy word for the part of our parasympathetic that engages with other humans. Now, I know, and we're in a world where so many people are isolated
mm,
versus that classic siesta in Spain where everybody's, having grappa and eating grapes and having, kids are playing and everyone's
yeah.
laughing and there's music being played. Like, yeah, that is the perfect picture of good social engagement and having a rest when the sun is hot, right?
Mm,
But we don't all live in that idealistic world. So it's like if you live by yourself, there's nothing wrong with having a fun evening where you watch something, but just watch if it's becoming, like you said, the thing that's sucking you more into the shutdown of the parasympathetic,
mm,
right? Or if you need that hit of watching the action show or whatever that gives you that adrenaline at night to keep you awake. I mean,
mm-hmm,
I think that's why video games have become so, and always have been so attractive, usually more for men, is it gives them that fight impulse
mm,
that's, and chasing and shooting and hunting that is in their DNA,
yeah.
right? To do that stuff. For kids though, because you mentioned, the kids and screens, that's a whole other beast.
It is.
We know that blue light from our devices is horrific for our hormones.
Mm,
We know that kids really not should not be looking at that light in their eyes and so close up, which so many do.
mm,
And they don't have self-regulation.
yeah.
So they're not going to know that they shouldn't be sitting there
Yeah.
for hours and hours. It's very different than our generation, Alex, where we grew up watching TV, where there was
Mm.
cartoons and like we
But then your
watched.
favorite show ends and you have to go off and do something else. Like these days,
Exactly.
the internet doesn't
It
end.
constantly goes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's some people that say you shouldn't give a kid a phone until they're 14, 16, 15. It's like, how do you decide?
Mm.
But I think it also comes down to what else is going on in the home life.
Yeah. And teaching, realizing we have a role to teach regulation and healthy boundaries around that usage.
100%. And you
Mm.
have to keep the boundary because the moment you break it,
Mm.
the kiddo knows, ooh, I can
Yeah.
break this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's
I
going to
know.
feel hard. And this is the other thing of being a parent, you have to be okay feeling the discomfort that your children are feeling.
Mm.
And that's the part where if we have not worked on our own wounds of feeling discomfort, we're not going to be okay watching our little one feel discomfort when they don't get what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the biggest pieces that I think we need to figure out because
Yes.
learning right from wrong is still so important. And for many kids, they're not getting that discipline and
So
boundary.
important.
Mhm,
Absolutely. I often talk with parents, not so much about screens, it's not
mhm.
really my place, but when it comes to food, we're asking 2-year-olds what they feel like. I'm like, no, no, no.
No, give
You
them
know,
healthy food. They'll choose
we,
exactly what they want.
yeah, exactly. And we have to
Yeah,
recognize that as parents, a huge part of raising regulated, happy kids is to teach them about the world they're entering and how it's got to be in the right from wrong sense. And
exactly.
I feel like the tech, because it's new, we feel like we're out of our depth, but we can apply that same principle.
Of course. Of
Mm,
course. And they're starting to, I know here in our local area, someone who I know has kids in high school, but they just banned phones in elementary school.
yeah.
I'm like, thank God.
Reasonable, very reasonable. Yes.
So, I think that we're starting to understand the consequences of these things. Of course, we know what's happening with online bullying. It's out of this world, different than when we were young, when it happened on the playground.
Mm,
So, that's a whole other area. But I would say that kids need connection, safety, play, They need to know that you, as the parent, that you're good.
Mm.
Right. And so often there's this misunderstanding that how am I not going to teach my kids emotional regulation if I don't let myself cry, if I don't let myself
Mm.
emote? It's like, well, if you're regulated, the emotion is very tempered.
Mm.
It isn't, it isn't bombs going off. It isn't
Yes.
aggression flying across the room. That will terrify them, just
Mm.
like it'll terrify them if they see you collapse in a puddle of tears, right? And you can't move. It's like for them, that's death. It's like, okay, I better figure out how to help mommy because she can't
Mm.
stand up right now.
Mm.
Right. So they will learn they will learn regulation through your own regulation. And
Mm.
that's the part that, this is not the quick fix because it's very tricky because a lot of people have their children and they go, oh man, I am being triggered by my own child.
Yeah.
And that's the sign that there is healing. So to go back to your question quite a while ago, how does someone know
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
need healing? Yeah, if you're being triggered by your own kids, that is a very telltale sign that you have got dysregulation. Because again, if that was the case for the thousands of years, tens of thousands of years that we've been here, we wouldn't have survived as a human
Mm.
race.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's a sign. Yep, there's some work to do. No shame in it, no blame. Find a way to do your work, get your nervous system back online, and you will find that that way of interacting with your kids becomes super different.
Yeah.
Very, very different.
That's huge. So
Mm-hmm.
huge. And I think often, you brought up men and that fight DNA.
Yeah.
I think they don't realize that they have that dysregulation, because it's normal to arc up with another guy when gonna have a fight, and like in the schoolyard or at the skate park or
Mm-hmm.
wherever that is when you're growing up. And
Mm-hmm.
then but it's not healthy to not be able to bounce back or to go from 0 to 100 really,
No,
really quick.
no, you need to be able
Um,
to, again, regulation doesn't mean that we don't get angry,
mm,
that we don't get scared, that we don't, it means that we feel that coming up and we know how to be with it so that we don't have to manage it or suppress it or have it go through the roof.
mm,
And typically in our culture, especially the West, it's acceptable to go to the bar and get wasted and have a fight with your bros,
mm.
like, oh, that's what guys do. It's like, well, actually, that's a little dysfunctional.
Yeah, that's what
you
really
know?
dysregulated guys do, actually. Yeah.
But yeah, okay.
You do
So,
you.
but it
Mm.
is healthy to, go and play ball. Like there's a reason why we've created these sports to
I
get movement
agree.
and
Yeah.
have team and all that kind of stuff. And women need healthy aggression too. That's the other thing,
Mm,
right? It goes both ways. We're just because it's the man doesn't mean it's about anger and for the women, it's not just about feeling sadness and tenderness and connection. It's like each person, whether you're male or female, we have all of these emotions
mm.
in us. And of course, if we are dysregulated, the way that they come out will not be as they should. They will be
Yes.
over the
So,
top or too much, too little.
yes, so it's not about not feeling them.
No,
It's actually about how that gets felt, processed, and expressed.
exactly.
Hmm. Yeah.
And anger is a good example. Like anger that is not properly experienced and contained, that turns to violence,
Mm.
right? No one commits a crime because they're happy and they have a good,
Yeah.
fulfilled life.
Yeah.
They're acting out a held aggression towards something, and usually it's towards the family system that messed with them or the system that
Or
messed
the
with them
economic system or the
or the
medical
economic
system.
system.
Yeah. A lot of
Exactly.
people, get really upset at looters and carjacking and I'm just like, but why are they doing
Why?
that?
Yeah, they're not doing
That's
that just for the
no.
heck of it.
Mm-mm. They're doing that
They're
because they're in survival and
100%.
they've been pushed to it. And
Yeah.
I think we have to really recognize the mini versions of that. because you
Mhm.
know, it's very easy for us as humans to watch a news report and go, oh, those idiots and those
Terrible.
bastards, and how were they raised? And then it's like, but you blow up at your kid over the tiniest, you know. And then I think we need to really recognize that we are all on like a spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a responsibility to recognize our emotional
100%.
processing. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I did a video a while ago. I don't have time to get into all of it, but it's called The Story of Teddy.
Oh,
And
I'll share it in the show notes for
yeah,
everyone.
it's
Yeah.
essentially a synopsis and a history of the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, who was
Mm,
famous in the United States for being basically sociopathic and killing a lot of people through letter bombs.
mm,
And my mentor, Peter Levine, interviewed his mother, and essentially, he suffered intense medical trauma when he was young,
hmm,
and he never was the same when he came out of that. And then the story just gets worse and worse and worse as he grows up, and then he breaks, and
mm.
he can't hold it in anymore. So it's worth watching that because it shows you that a person's journey will be dictated not just by one thing, but all the other things that might occur after that then just push them and push them until they just go over the edge.
Mm. And to really recognize that surgeries and hitting heads and all those sorts of things that happen need
Yeah.
not just the physical healing when you go to the doctor or you have the surgery and
Yeah.
then it's done,
You
because
need
there
to,
has,
yeah, the
yeah.
survival physiology, and this is a whole other topic, but the anesthesia will lock you into that survival state. And
Mm,
this is a topic that Peter Levine has really dug into. It's hard to find any literature on it because it's so new.
mm,
But you know, you hear stories of someone goes in for that surgery and then they're just never quite the same. This is more common with elderly. But I do think it's because their system kind of goes into a bit of a shutdown with that
yeah.
anesthesia.
Well, Chinese medicine calls surgery mini death.
Of course,
So,
because you're dying, you're having a near-death experience.
mm,
Anesthesia, you are out. You are not in control of your body.
mm,
And there is some suspicion that, you know, your soul goes somewhere while you're out
mm,
like that. Just like if you are about to die because of a near choking or drowning or an accident that terrorizes you, and you are still stuck in that terror, you can go on to life thinking that you're okay, but you're actually still stuck in that shock state.
mm,
And that then can lead to many health problems. Back to what I was saying about being stuck in that freeze response, and then that rest digest isn't working. And this is where
mm,
we'll see someone, yeah, they're just deteriorating after that accident or that surgery. And it's the surgery, it's the accidents, but it's how the physiology is still holding in that state something that occurred last year or even 50 years ago.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, yeah, let's not open up another can of
No.
worms, because we literally don't have time to. But Irene,
Mhm.
thank you so much. And I think what I'm
Mm,
I'm really hearing time and again from what you've been talking about is many things happen in life, and many people go through births, deaths, marriages, all the things,
all the
fights,
things.
breakups, surgeries. And if we're not acknowledging our nervous system in these move on
Yeah.
phases,
Yeah.
then things can really come back to bite us, either medically, mentally, um,
100%.
and so it's very much a part of, well, center stage. Let's put it where it belongs.
It's pretty center stage. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, even a lot of my mentors are being as bold to say that pretty much every single diagnosis in the DSM manual of psychiatry can be traced back to early childhood trauma.
Hmm.
And as I've
Yeah.
worked with thousands of people, yep.
Mm,
There might be some
mm,
genetic predisposition, but what creates the situation for those genes to express? It's unsafety. It's
mm,
the,
it is.
it's the survival physiology being in absolute terror, agony, freeze, and then the psyche trying to figure it out. And if you
Mm,
have nobody there to tell you that what you're feeling is accurate, you know, you can go a little crazy trying
mm,
to figure out why you can't calm yourself, or why you have these obsessive thoughts, or why you feel the desire to kill someone. Like, what is that? It's like, oh, well, actually, it's probably because you were mistreated in a certain way and you couldn't fight or you couldn't run. Right. So when you really bring this back, while I am biased with this work, I have seen that, yeah, it's pretty accurate. A lot of our troubles stem from that. And then, of course, complementing it with the good nutrition and getting all the toxins out of our life and ensuring that we're getting lots of sunshine, like these things go together so well.
They really do. And
Yeah.
and the fact that it doesn't have to have been this awful or
No.
perceivably awful thing. It could have been a traumatic birth or a difficult birth, or it could have been your 2-year-old falls on a tile with a huge egg on their head that swells up. Like that is trauma too. And I'm really hearing from you that it's basically almost impossible to not need to do some regulation work over the course of one's lifetime.
Yeah, I haven't met anybody in the West who hasn't had some form of traumatic event or chronic misattunement when they were young. Right? That little bit of misattunement is enough to actually put a system into deep chronic stress because it's repeated over a decade, 2 decades, if you're with your parents into your 20s, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, and all it has to be, Alex, is like mom and dad don't like each other. You know, I heard this a lot. They stayed together for the kids, and yet in that staying together, they were miserable. You know, and the kids never saw good connection and good relationship. They just saw snapping and cold treatment and you know, all these abusive characteristics that kind of just fly under the radar.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, oh yeah, that was stressful for you when you were little. You didn't realize it because you weren't being threatened with a fist or with something, but that was stressful. And we actually have seen, I have seen, and many have seen that can be harder. That low level misattunement can be harder to work with. It's not impossible. It's perfectly possible to heal that, but it's harder because there's no event that you remember.
Yes, I can completely see how that would be harder because of the vagueness of it.
It's so vague. And it just becomes normal until you go to someone else's house and you see their mom and dad, you know, joking and having fun, and it's like, whoa, this is weird. Right?
Irene, thank you. Your
Very
work is
welcome.
awesome. So, so lovely to be able to bring it to our beautiful low tox community. I dare say you might see a few people knock on your door after
Thank
this
you.
chat, and
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
Thanks, Alex. Bye, everyone.
Bye. I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.